Hello everybody, Raven Knight here, and welcome to the beginning of a brand new Bible study series. I am so excited. This is by popular request, by the way. I've had a lot of people wanting me to talk about the story of Samson, and I am very excited to do that with you guys today. Samson is a fascinating character in the Bible, and he takes up a couple of chapters in the book of Judges, which is where I want you guys to turn today. If you have a Bible, and I hope you do, go ahead and open up to the book of Judges. That is in the Old Testament. Go ahead and open up to the book of Judges and go to Judges 13. We're going to start in Judges 13 today. Before we get too far into it, while y'all are turning to that page in the Bible, I would like to welcome all of you who are new. If you are brand new to my channel or to my Bible study series, welcome. Every Sunday, I do a Bible study series with you guys of my own creation. We read through some of the Bible. I get to share my faith with you, and it's just an all-around pretty good time, and I hope you take something meaningful from it. If you've watched these before, I hope you get something great out of this one. I'm going to be putting a lot of my time and energy into making these, so please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. We'll be happy to hear from you. So let's go ahead and get started with kind of an introduction to who Samson is and what the book of Judges is. You can basically sum up the book of Judges as a cycle. The Israelites at this point in their history have made it to the promised land. They have no king. They have no real government. They are a theocracy. They follow the word of God on occasion, which comes into how the book of Judges works. Essentially what would happen is the Israelites would start to get very enthralled and enamored with the livelihood of the pagans around them. They start worshiping false gods. They start forgetting God's commandments. They start doing evil in the eyes of the Lord. And then what happens is the Lord turns his back on them, and that allows calamity to befall them. They either get caught up in disease, they get overrun by enemy forces, they get conquered by the Philistines or the Amalekites or all these other neighbors that they have. And then the Israelites suffer for a certain period of time until they start calling for God's aid again, and then God comes back and saves them through one of his judges. And these judges are basically people that God has anointed to be his representatives and his speakers who stand above the Israelites. They stand over the Israelites. They help the Israelites go forward. When the judges die, the Israelites are really sad, and they continue to follow God's commandments until they fall away again, rinse and repeat. This is kind of what you can see in the book of Judges. In fact, I heard a pastor one time say that if history repeats itself, we right now are living in the time of the judges, because you can just see it happen where we have these revivals where everyone's coming to God and we're living with God for a while, then all of a sudden we fall away and allow bad things to happen, bad stuff hits us, and then we come back to God, we ask for God to save us again, and then we repeat this cycle again and again and again. And that's not a bad representation for where we are. I feel like that is something that we struggle with, staying true to God. But we're going to be talking about one of the judges, one of the most popular judges in the book of Judges, Samson. Now, how would you describe Samson? If you don't know who the guy is, I will try to describe him in the best way I can, and it's not a flattering description. Many people think of Samson and they think of his strength. That's what a lot of people think of. Samson was the strongest man in the world. He was so strong he could kill a lion with his bare hands. He could kill 100 men with nothing but the jawbone of a donkey. This guy was incredibly strong. That's not how I would first think of Samson. That's not my first thought when it comes to Samson. When I first think of Samson, I think of this description. It's a description that my pastor gave him. He is essentially a child in an adult body. A child in an adult body. And I'm going to tell you guys the truth. There's nothing more scary than a child in an adult body. And we're going to see why. We're going to talk all about Samson today. We're going to be in Judges 13 and 14 today. Really excited to get started. So let's not waste any more time. We've had enough preamble. Go ahead and open up to Judges 13, and we're going to start reading in verse 1. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Let's pause right there. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Again! This is not an uncommon thing at this point. See what I said before? Again, they did this. Again. If I were God at this point, I'd be a little fed up. But God is patient, man. I tell you what, that is crazy. So, continuing. Verse 2. A certain man of Zorah, named Manoah, from the clan of the Danites, had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. Verse 3, the angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, you are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Verse 4, Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. All right, let's pause there. Let's talk about what he just said. Your son is to be a Nazirite. What does that mean? What is a Nazirite? A Nazirite is a person who from the time of their birth has been promised to God. And this isn't just a simple, oh, okay, I promise that. No, it is a vow. It's a dedication that cannot be broken. They are not allowed to touch dead meat or dead things. They cannot touch dead humans, dead animals, dead anything. They can't drink wine. They can't cut their hair. And there are various other rituals that must be maintained for the Nazirite to maintain their vow. But in return, God gives them his blessing. And the Nazirite here, Samson, is going to be blessed because he's going to take the lead in driving out the Philistines. Now, we're going to leave chapter 13 there, because then after that, it's just the wife and husband wanting to verify all that's happened to them. This is them wanting to verify all that's happened. But it does come true. Samson's mother refrains from drinking wine and interacting with dead things, and Samson comes into the world. And we can leave it there. Now we'll skip ahead to just before chapter 14. We're going to be in chapter 13, verse 24, where it says here, the woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Mahaneh Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. Now let me explain why that's important. Where Samson's tribe is located, it is a barren area. It is a large area that is close to the enemies of Israel. They are a kind of a warrior group. So Samson, seeing all these warriors and fighting, probably had the Lord stirring in him to become a fighter himself. And you'll see this come out when we get into later chapters of Samson. But I think it's important to understand the circumstances of Samson's birth. We need to understand why it is so important that Samson was brought into the world this way. Samson was not a normal birth. He was chosen before he was born to be special. An angel straight up came to his mother and said, your son is going to be a Nazirite. He's going to take the lead in getting your people to safety. Imagine if an angel came to your parents and told them, your child is going to be special. You need to treat him this way. Wouldn't that be something? But I think that may have also been a double-edged sword. I genuinely think this. I think that may have been a bit of a double-edged sword. By telling Samson he's special, it made him a bit spoiled. Maybe it's a good thing that God doesn't tell our parents how special we're going to be. Maybe it's a good thing that we are special because God made us and God has a plan for us. See, that's something to keep in mind, guys, and I want you to take note of this. God has a plan for you before you're even born. Before you're born, God has a plan for you. Now, in Samson's case, the angel came and told the mother and father exactly what Samson was going to do. But God doesn't tell us. God doesn't tell us ahead of time, but we need to trust that God has a plan for us. He's got something special in mind for you. The problem I see is that God told Samson's parents, and I think they spoiled the boy a bit. And you're going to see that come out in the next chapter. I think they spoiled Samson a little bit, and that's what let him be a child in an adult body. And we're going to take a look at that. Let's go ahead and open up to Judges 14. Judges 14, right after the last one we just read. Verse 1. Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. I love the way he says that. Just get her for me. Not even, I'd like to marry her, or would it be okay if I married her, or I'd like to get to know her, or would you like to meet her, or no, just get her for me. Again, spoiled. Spoiled. Have you ever seen a child in a toy store? Mom, I want this, I want that, I want this, give it for me. And if they say no, oh, God help you if they say no, the screaming starts. The screaming starts. I've seen it. I worked in Longhorns for a while. Watching a child throw a tantrum is impressive. But they're kids. Children throw tantrums. Children are very selfish creatures. Anyone who wants to say that human beings are not sinful by nature, watch a 2-year-old. 2-year-olds are greedy, selfish, conceited. Oh, they can have their cute moments, but trust me, they're sinful. And Samson is a 2-year-old in an adult body. Watch this. Verse 3. His father and mother replied, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistine to get a wife?" But Samson said to his father, "Get her for me. She's the right one for me." Again, get her for me. She's the right one for me. Here's the funny thing about that. They have the right to say no. Samson's parents can say no to this. They can deny him. Because marriage at this point in time is not just a simple matter of I love you, let's get together. There was a tradition involved. Families had to be involved in this. And this is unbiblical as well. According to the word of God, you must not wed those outside of the tribe of Israel because, and there's a reason for this, because it's going to create problems for your lineage down the road. It's going to create issues down the road. This is unbiblical. This is something that they do not want to do. This is something they want to avoid. And the father's saying, aren't there better people? Aren't there people amongst your tribe? Aren't there people who like, because here's the thing. Now you might argue, well, what about situations like Ruth or those kind of situations where Ruth is a different case, and we're going to do a whole study on Ruth in the future. Ruth is awesome. I do want to talk about her. But in this case, this is a Philistine woman from a Philistine family who has no interest in integrating with the Israelites. Samson just thinks she's hot and wants to marry her, and God help you if you don't let him have her. Get her for me. She's the right one for me. Now notice what it says after that in verse 4. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. I want to take note of that little bit in parentheses. I think that's very important. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. God will use our sinful desires for his gain, but that doesn't mean they're good. That doesn't mean they're good. Samson's behavior is not something to praise, but God is using it for what he plans. Some people will hear that and say, oh, well, I can just keep on sinning and God will use it for what he wants. No, that's not what I said. I'm saying that God is using our sinful desires for his gain. A person can have no faith in God, no belief in God, and live a sinful, distasteful life, and God is still using them and their behavior to further his plans. So even a person who does not believe God exists, God is still using them for what he wants. They just may not reap the benefit of it. And you'll see that in just a second. Samson doesn't reap any benefits here. Next verse. Verse 5. Watch this one, guys. But Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards them. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. There are two things that I want to take from this. Two things. So we have a scene where Samson rushes forward, sees a lion, it attacks, he rips it apart with his bare hands. That's how strong Samson is. Think of the size and power of a lion. And Samson tore it apart with his bare hands. This man is Herculean strength. He is a monster in human form. But he didn't tell his parents about it. You know, if I was as strong as Samson, and I was walking down the road, and a lion that escaped from the zoo jumped out at me, and I took it down with my bare hands, the first thing I'm doing is calling mom and dad. Mom, dad, you won't believe this. But Samson didn't tell him. Why? Why does he hide it? The Bible doesn't tell us, but I have a theory. When we live our life in a manner that isn't godly, and yet we know about God, we start to see a lot of what we do as shameful and worth concealing. Think about it. If you actually see, Samson knows about how important he is. He knows he's a Nazirite. He knows it. He knows that he's been promised to God from the time of his birth. He knows it. His parents have readily informed him. He's special. So he knows God's plans for him. He's aware of God and God's purpose for him. So that means when he does wrong, he recognizes, I probably did wrong here. Now, do you think that killing the lion was wrong? Maybe not. Maybe not necessarily. But at the same time, and maybe I shouldn't tell mom and dad. Maybe this is something I keep to myself. Why? Could it be wrong? I don't know, but I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to risk getting in trouble. I'm going to stay secretive about it. And then, read on, he meets her, talks to her, and likes her. Do you know what that means? Samson looked at this woman from afar, hasn't said one word to her, goes to his parents and says, get her for me as my wife, finally talks to her and says, okay, yeah, I like her. Really? That is so childish. Imagine that. A child sees a video game they really want. I want this game. Dad looks at it. That's pretty pricey, son. Have you even heard of this game? No, but I want it. Okay, we'll get it for you. Gets it, plays it. Okay, Dad, I like this game. I like this game. Imagine if you didn't like it. He said, I don't like this game. This is awful. Wasted a lot of money there for what you thought you might like. Do you see what I mean when I say that Samson is childish? He is a child in an adult body, and it's not going to get any better. Let's keep going. Verse 8. Oh, brace yourselves. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, and in it he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. Now, you might think that's weird. That's not too weird. There are cases where bees will build nests or hives within dead bodies or dead animals because it takes a while for them to decompose, and you can make use of the nutrients inside the body for a time being. But no, this gets gross. Listen, he scooped out the honey with his hands and ate it as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some and they too ate it, but he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. Good Lord. If that didn't turn your stomach a little. To recap, he walked by the dead lion that he'd killed just the other day. A beehive has built its nest in the lion's carcass. He scoops out some of the honey to eat and shares it with his parents. Now, leaving aside the obvious gross factor here, leaving that aside for a moment, do you realize what he just did? He's a Nazirite. He's not supposed to mess with dead things, and yet he puts his hand in a dead lion's body to eat honey from it. And not only does he do this, he shares it with his parents. He is not only sinning, he is sharing in sin. He is engaging and involving other peoples in his sin. In fact, there's a verse in the Bible that Jesus mentions. It's very important. Turn to, if you would, Luke 17. I think this is a very important verse. I've got it in over here. Here we are, Luke 17, verses 1 through 3. Jesus said to his disciples, things that cause people to stumble are bound to come, but woe to anyone through whom they come. It would be better for them to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their neck than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. So watch yourselves. Woe to those who cause others to stumble. Woe to those who cause others to stumble. Look, it's one thing to sin. Okay, we're going to sin, we're going to mess up. That's just going to happen. It's human nature. But when you drag other people into your sin, oh, that's even worse. That's even worse. It's forgivable. God will still forgive it, but you have dragged someone else into your sin. Just gosh. You know what? I don't like Samson. I'm not a fan of this guy right now. He is an absolute awful person. Absolutely awful. But guess what, guys? It gets worse. We're going into verse 10, and Samson's about to show his butt. Verse 10. Now his father went down to see the woman, and there Samson held a feast as was customary for young men. When the people saw him, they chose 30 men to be his companions. Verse 12. Let me tell you a riddle, Samson said to them. If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. Well, tell us your riddle, they said. Let's hear it. He replied, Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. For 3 days, they could not give the answer. So first of all, let's take a moment to respect the fact that not only did he eat something that was unclean for him, it was sinful, he shared it with his parents, even worse, and now he's telling a joke about it. Let's look at that riddle again. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. He's joking about the lion and the honey. Hate to spoil that for you, but that's what the riddle is all about. He's talking about the honey and the lion that he ate. He's telling a joke about it. He is making his sinful action into a jest to take something from other people. Because he knows that none of them, other than him, and will get that joke. He knows that only he would understand the context of it. He is taking advantage of his sinful action to not only drag other people into sin, but to steal from others because he knows they'll never get the joke. This is, in a word, sick. Samson is a sick person. But you know what? That's a child in an adult's body. How depraved do you have to be to sin and laugh about it? That's what I see children do. When I was a teacher, I would watch kids do really stupid, inappropriate things, and then when I called them out, they laugh when I call them out. They laugh. They think it's a joke. They think it's funny. They don't think it's a big deal. A child in an adult's body. And you know people like this. You know that's the scariest thing about Samson. He's not alone. We know people like this today. Imagine giving that person authority over a family, a job position, maybe even a state as a mayor or a country as a president or king. Imagine a person like Samson taking care of a family. Imagine a person like Samson in your own day-to-day life. If you think hard about the people you work with, you might be able to identify them. You might actually say, yeah, I know someone like that. But you know what's even scarier? You might look at yourself and say, how like Samson am I? And that is what I want to leave with you guys today. We're not done. We got a little bit more to go. But I want you guys to really meditate on this. Are you anything like Samson? And if not, do you know anyone like Samson? Oh, Samson's strong, and that's to be admired, but his strength isn't his own. It comes from the Lord. But Samson himself is a depraved, awful individual. Absolutely awful. We're almost done, though, guys. Let's finish up the chapter. Verse 15. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property? Then Samson's wife threw herself onto him, sobbing, you hate me, you don't really love me, you've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. I haven't even explained it to my father or mother, he replied. Why should I explain it to you? She cried the whole 7 days of the feast, so on the 7th day he finally told her because she continued to press him. She in turn explained the riddle to her people. Before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town said to him, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And Samson said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of everything, and gave their clothes to those who explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's home, and Samson's wife was given to one of his companions who had attended him at the feast. Wow, there's a lot to go into. But here we get a real idea of what kind of people are involved in this story. Sorry. We have the Philistines. They are angry and sneaky. They want to manipulate Samson's fiancée so that they don't lose a bet that they agreed to. Hey, here's the thing. They could have backed out of this bet. But they agreed to it. They agreed, okay, we're going to go along with this bet. We're going to play this bet. And when they realize they can't win, they threaten Samson's wife and her family If you don't tell us the answer to the riddle, we will burn you and your father's land. So they're not nice people. Then we have the fiance, who's a cunning and manipulative woman who will use her tears to get Samson to do what she wants. Don't you think it would have been interesting if she went to Samson and said, Samson, honey, listen, I know that it's your riddle, but they are now threatening me and my father if you don't tell them the answer. They are now threatening me and my father. Couldn't Samson have brought them forward and said, hey, hold on, you're threatening my wife to get the answer. Not only is that cheating, that's wrong, and you know it. But no, she doesn't do that. She cries and manipulates him, saying, oh, you don't love me. You don't really love me. If you loved me, you'd tell me the answer. Saying, I didn't even tell my parents. Why would I tell? Oh, you don't really love me. Fine, I'll tell you. Thank you. Not a great woman either. Not exactly a great woman herself. Not an honest woman. Very manipulative. And then Samson, of course, the star of the hour, a child who not only caves into her tears, but also insults his own wife, referring to her as a heifer, a cow. And then, to add on to that, he storms off and throws a tantrum. Not just any tantrum. He goes to a Philistine village, kills 30 men, takes their clothes, and gives them to the Philistines to settle the bet. And then, oh no, we're not done, then goes home to pout at his father's house, in the middle of the wedding, because this was on the next to the last day. He goes home to pout at his father's house while his wife is given to someone else, because it's very bad if the husband or wife walks out of the wedding. So to save face, she had to be given to another man. There are no good people here. The Philistines are wicked and underhanded. Samson's wife is a cunning and shrewd manipulator, and Samson himself is a tantrum-throwing, pouting child. But we are getting a sense of who these people are. There are quite a lot of them out there, and there are a few things more dangerous. You know them. You've probably seen them. People who are manipulative, people who throw tantrums when they don't get their way, people who are destructive. They're out there. Now you might be saying, Raven, this is a very uplifting Bible study. This doesn't make me feel good. Not all Bible studies are meant to make you feel good. Some are meant to make you think. And what I want you to think about today is this. What I want you to take home is this. Some people out there, yourself included maybe, are children in adult bodies. You behave like a child. But behaving like a child is no way to live as an adult. Now, I'm not saying you can't indulge in childish hobbies, like watching cartoons, playing games. That's not what I'm saying. Behaving like a child means that you have the mannerisms of a child. You have the attitude of a child. You demand things though you haven't earned them. You throw tantrums when you don't get your way. You commit sin, joke about it, and engage others in it. These are childish actions. Are you like Samson? If you're not like Samson, are you like Samson's parents? Are you enabling a sinner? Samson's parents could have said no. They could have said, no, Samson, you're not getting this Philistine woman. We forbid it. Are you enabling another sinner? Are you allowing someone who is behaving in this way to continue doing what they're doing? Are you like Samson's neighbors, the Philistines, manipulative and cunning, willing to take advantage of other people or threaten people to get your way? Or are you like Samson's soon-to-be wife, a woman who is willing to manipulate and be cunning and use tears to get a man to do what she wants, rather than be honest and direct with him? There are no good people here. There are a lot of problems here. The only genuinely good people I can think of are Samson's parents, and even they are guilty of enabling Samson to continue living in this very shameful lifestyle. But what I want you to be left with is this: God is always forgiving. Whether you are like Samson, his parents, the fiancé, or the Philistines, God can forgive. God is here to forgive and lead you down the straight and narrow. And as we go further into Samson's story, because we're not done, we got further to go with Samson. We probably got another 2 or 3 days on Samson. We're going to see how God continues to use Samson, how God is able to use someone even like him to accomplish his work. I look forward to it. I'm very excited for the next meeting, and I will see you in that next video. Take care. Hello everybody, Raven Knight here, and welcome back to our second day in the series known as the story of Samson. We're going to be talking again about Samson today. Go ahead and turn in your Bibles if you have one, and I hope you do. Turn your Bibles to Judges chapter 15. That's where we're going to be today, and we're going to talk about what revenge looks like. Samson teaches us a lot of things. He may not have been a very good man. He may have made a lot of mistakes, but he taught us a lot from his life, and I think we can learn a great deal from his errors. And today we're going to be learning about revenge and just how awful it is. So go ahead and turn there. And while you're getting there, if you are new to this series or new to what I do here, every Sunday I like to do a Bible study video, and I do them in series. I've done a video on going through the book of Romans. I've done a video going through the life of David. We've done one on the Ten Commandments recently, and now we are doing the story of Samson. And I am so excited to go further into this. So I hope you get something special out of it. This is just a great opportunity for me to share my faith with other people so that other people can hear the gospel, hear the word of God, and hopefully come to him one day. If you are familiar with the series and have watched it before, welcome back. I hope that you enjoy what we talk about today. I am really excited to get into it. Now, quick recap about what we talked about last week when we were introduced to Samson. What did we describe Samson as last time? We described him as a child in an adult body, or a child who grew up physically but not mentally. And that can pretty much sum up everything we need to know about who Samson is, because everything he does is pretty childish, right? So essentially what happened is the Israelites right now are being controlled and oppressed by the Philistines. So our God has sent down a savior named Samson. He has allowed this woman who was barren to finally have a child named Samson, who is a Nazarite. Now, what is a Nazarite? A Nazarite is a person who has been sworn to God and is meant to uphold a promise between themselves and God. He can't cut his hair. He can't touch dead things. He can't mess around with wine or alcohol. Samson has to live a pure life like that. But in return, God will give him massive amounts of strength to be able to fight the Philistines. And Samson has been spoiled his whole life knowing, hey, I'm special, I'm cool, I'm chosen by God, I can do whatever I want. So he starts off his story by meeting this woman who he really wants to marry, but she's a Philistine. So he goes to his parents and say, hey, get her for me. Well, don't you want a girl who's, not a pagan? Don't you want someone from, your own people? No, get her for me. She's the one for me. So they're making their way to go propose to the girl when he comes across a lion who he kills. And then later comes back to find that lion with a beehive in its stomach. So he reaches into this dead animal, remember, can't mess with dead things, and takes some of the honey to eat it, shares that honey with his parents without telling them where it came from, and then makes a joke at his wedding about it. In fact, it's not just any joke, he makes a bet. He says, if you can't guess the answer to my riddle, then you owe me 30 linens and fabrics and clothings. But if you can guess it, I owe them to you. The Philistine guests all go, well, let's hear the riddle. And for 4 days, they could not figure it out. So they threaten his fiancée to get the answer out of Samson. She gets it. They guess the riddle. Samson loses his temper and goes and beats up a bunch of Philistines to take their clothes to pay off the debt, and then leaves his wedding to go pout at his father's house. Samson doesn't sound like an all-around good guy. He does not. And you know what, guys? It's about to get worse, because all that we've talked about with Samson so far, you could argue, is just him being a brat. But what we're going to talk about today is something that Samson teaches us that he didn't mean to teach us, but we need to take it to heart, okay? All right, so the question I want to ask before we jump into things is, do you think that revenge is ever justified? In media and fiction, we like to talk about how revenge is a poison or that it doesn't actually satisfy anything. But leaving aside the personal aspect, what can the Bible tell us about revenge? Samson's story is going to teach us all about it. So let's start off in Judges 15, verse 1. It says, later on, at the time of wheat harvest, keep that in mind, that's important, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said, I'm going to my wife's room. But her father would not let him go in. I was so sure you hated her, he said, that I gave her to your companion. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead. Samson said to them, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them. Let's take a minute to address what was just said there. A couple things. First of all, remember, Samson abandoned his own wedding to go home and pout because they guessed his riddle. So, since it's bad form for the fiancée to have her husband walk out on them, proper etiquette dictates that she be given to someone, so she was given to one of the other men at the party. That's how it worked back then. So now Samson, after all this time, it's gone to the point of the wheat harvest. Samson is walking up with a young goat saying, this will make everything all right, and then says, hey, you're my father-in-law, right? I'm going to go have sex with my wife, if you'll excuse me. No, hold on. She's not here. I gave her to your companion. You walked out. But hey, she has a younger sister, and she's even hotter. Don't you want the younger sister? So all around, we're not seeing very good people here. But notice what Samson says. Notice what Samson says in response to that in verse 3. He says, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them. This time I have a right. You know what that says? It tells me two things. Number one, all the things he did in the past, like beating up the Philistines to take their stuff, he knew it was wrong. He knew he had no right to do that. He knew that he was throwing a temper tantrum. But this time, though, he's like, oh, I've got the right now. What you've done, I've got the right to do it now. Question, do you think he has the right? Do you think he actually has the right to do any harm to the Philistines because of what happened to him? No, everything that's happening to him now is his own damn fault. Everything that's happening to him now is of his own doing. He's the one who made a riddle off of a sin he committed. He's the one who walked away and, just threw a tantrum. He's the one who pouted for a very long time at his own father's house. And now he's coming back thinking everything will be okay. And when he hears that it's not okay, he missed out on his chance to get married to this girl. Well, now I have the right to hurt people. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt like someone's wronged you, so now you have the right to hurt them back? Or at the very least to hurt someone else? And that's what Samson's going through right now. He thinks, I have the right to do this. And he even adds, I will really harm them. You know, here's the reality. Samson was chosen by God to harm the Philistines. He was chosen by God to break the Philistines off of Israelites' back, right? He was meant to push out the Philistines. That was his job. But is he doing it for God or for the good of the Israelites? Or is he doing it to settle his own personal vendettas? Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. All right. So let's move forward. Verse 4. So he went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. He then fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. He burned up the shocks and standing grain together and with the vineyards and olive groves. When the Philistines asked who did this, they were told, Samson the Timnite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to his companion. So the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death. Samson said to them, since you've acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you. That's a lot. I admit, that's a lot. But let's really think about what just happened. First of all, Samson's act of revenge. He burns up their wheat fields. Keep in mind, this is the time of the wheat harvest. Wheat is necessary now. They need this for their crop. But he burns their wheat fields and burns their olive groves where they get olives for wines, and their grape vineyards. They're everything. He's burned it all. And how did he do it? He tied a bunch of torches to foxtails and released them into the vineyards and wheat fields. That's awful. All because the girlfriend that he wanted, the fiance he wanted, was given to someone else. He goes and does this. Guys, I want to make it very clear. In Samson's mind, he probably thought this was a joke. Yeah. No, listen to this. Listen to what he says in verse 7. Go back to verse 7 for me. In verse 7, Samson said to them, "Since you've acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. Then he went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Etam. So at first, he was using foxes. Why foxes, guys? Why do you think he used foxes? I mean, he could easily have just set fire to the fields himself, but why use foxes? Because it's indirect. It's sneaky, it's clever, it's funny. See, as far as he's concerned, it's all a big prank. You know, when I was a teacher, I remember this one kid that I was teaching. I remember he was walking into class and he smacked a boy in the back of his head. Just smacked a boy in front of him in the back of his head, knocking his glasses off. And he and his buddies laughed it up until they realized I noticed. And I walked over and I said, "What the heck is going on? Why did you do that?" And you know what he said? "Dude, I was just joking, man. It was a joke." In his mind, it was just a joke. He's not at fault. It's not his fault. He was just messing around. He was getting his buddies to laugh, and you just had to laugh along with it. What, you didn't get the joke? It was funny. And in Samson's mind, the Philistines burning his fiancée and their family was totally unjust. This was wrong. See, when that kid smacked the other kid in the back of the head, I sent him to the administrator. That's not fair. Come on, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. That isn't fair to me. I was just joking. In Samson's mind, that's all he did when he burnt their fields to the ground. It was, "I'm going to get you back. Here's a prank that you'll never see coming." And now his fiancée and her family are all dead. What? That's not fair. That's not fair. Oh, I'm really going to get revenge now. I'm really getting back at you. You went way too far. So then he goes and slaughters a bunch of Philistines. And what does he do after he gets his revenge? What does he do after that? He goes and hides out in another cave. This guy's a brat. Samson is a giant baby. He goes out, causes destruction, goes to hide for a little while because he knows he did wrong, and he's going to pout about all the things that he lost until he finally comes out and says, "All right, everything's blown over. I'm good again." This guy does not like taking consequences. These are some things we can learn about Samson. He doesn't like taking consequences. He sees destructive behavior as pranks and jokes. He does not feel he deserves any kind of reprimand for what he does. And he believes that problems will go away on their own. Samson's not a good person. But I have a question for you before we continue. Question. Who do you know like Samson? And don't leave yourself off of that list. Have you ever behaved like that? Do you know people who behave like that? Question to consider. Let's move on to verse 9, because it gets crazy here. Verse 9. Sorry. The Philistines went up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lay. The people of Judah asked, "Why have you come to fight us?" "We have come to take Samson prisoner," they answered, "to do to him as he did to us." Then 3,000 men from Judah went down to the cave to the rock of Edom and said to Samson, "Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us?" He answered, "I merely did to them what they did to me." Let's pause there. There it is. Verse 10 and 11 kind of sum up the theme of this chapter. Because everyone's saying it. It's been said twice now. I did to them what they did to me. The Philistines said it first when they said, "We've come to do to Samson what he's done to us." And when the Israelites asked Samson, "Why did you do this?" "I simply did to them what they did to me." You know who talks like that? Children. Children talk like that. Again, story from my teaching days. Have two kids. They're throwing things at each other. You say, "Stop throwing things at each other." And what's the first thing they say? "She threw it first." "No, he threw his first." I have simply done to them what they have done to me. Now you might think, okay, kids will be kids. Samson's not a kid. The Philistines are not kids. These are adults. One of them is chosen by God to lead his people. And what is his mentality? Well, they started it. Y'all know the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What happens when people do you wrong, though? Isn't your first instinct to do wrong right back? An eye for an eye? Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want you to misunderstand me. Evil should be dealt with, and I'm all for justice and proper punishment. But just look at what's happened here. Samson lost a bet at a wedding and pitched a fit. The consequence? He lost his wife. So his thought, oh well, I'm going to go do wrong to you now. I'm going to go play a big joke and mess up your crops. What do the Philistines do? Well, we're going to do wrong to you now by killing your wife and father-in-law. Samson then goes, oh yeah? Well, I'm going to do wrong to you now. And back and forth and back and forth. And what's forgotten in this endless cycle of revenge is the reason for it. You know, it says in the Bible, vengeance belongs to the Lord. There's a reason for that, because humanity does not have the maturity to handle revenge. If you leave vengeance up to mortal men with mortal morality, you'll never see an end to it. You know what Samson could have said when the Israelites came to him? They could have said, what did you do? Okay, listen, here's what happened, guys. And then lay out everything that happened. That's not what he said. He said, I did to them what they did to me. I'm justified. I did the right thing. They did me wrong, so I did wrong right back. You can't punish me for that. You can't hate me for it. Will they? Read verse 12. Verse 12 is funny. It says, they said to him, we've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines. Samson said, swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves. You know what that's the equivalent of? Okay, promise you're not mad. Samson is now scared that the Israelites will kill him for what he's done. See, it's easy to beat up the Philistines. They're the bad guys. They're not cool. God doesn't like them. But my own people, I can't hurt them, you know. They're my family. They're my parents' family. I can't beat them up, you know. So you guys promise not to hurt me. I mean, if it's just the Philistines, I can beat them up. But please promise you won't kill me. He does not get consequence. That's the thing. Samson doesn't understand consequence. He thinks everything he does is right because it suits him. And if consequence comes along, if it's from the Philistines, oh, well, I'm going to get you back. When it's from the Israelites, now, hold on. Don't hurt me, guys, okay? Hold on. Oh, Samson, you absolute jerk. But let's move on. We got to get to verse 13 now. Watch what happens. Agreed, they answered. We will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you. So they bound him with 2 new ropes and led him up to the rock. As he approached Lay, the Philistines came toward him shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Then Samson said, with a donkey's jawbone, I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men. When he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone, and the place was called Ramath-Lay. Not a lot to go over here, but I do want to point something out. So we just saw Samson get taken to the Philistines. They're coming to kill him, but God frees him from his bindings and allows him to fight back. He picks up the jawbone of a donkey, wielding it like a club. He kills 1,000 Philistines with it. 1,000 Philistines. And what does Samson say about it? Who does he thank for it? Who defeated the Philistines? Himself. It's all about me. Read that again. With a donkey's jawbone, I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men. Whose power gave him the ability to do it? God. Quite often, we have a habit of taking credit for accomplishments only God could have allowed. Do you think a normal man could kill 1,000 men with just the jawbone of a donkey? No. God had to give him the power to do it, but Samson says, it's all me, baby. I did that. Am I not awesome? Look at how cool I am. Look at what I've just done. I've humiliated them. They thought they had me. They thought they could tie me down and beat me up. Nah, man, I'm the best. Look at how cool I am. Now, you might think, okay, so Samson doesn't even recognize God. Oh, no, he does. But watch what he does. In verse 18, this is incredible. Watch this. Because he was very thirsty, he cried out to the Lord, you have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? Then God opened up the hollow place in Lay, and water came out of it. When Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. So this ring was called En Hakor, and it is still there in Lay. Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Note how after Samson's great victory, Samson's attitude suddenly changes to self-pity. Look at how he talks to God. Oh God, you gave me this win, but now I'm going to die of thirst. You got to give me some water, God. I'm going to die here. You know, quite often after an emotional or physical victory or struggle, we start to feel drained or overwhelmed, and it's our habit to fall into depression and in a defeatist mindset. But notice when he talks to God. He doesn't talk to God when he's alone in his father's house or in the cave and he's pouting. He doesn't talk to God when he wins his great victory over the Philistines. No, he talks to God when he's feeling thirsty. That's when we remember God. And how many of you are like that? I'm not judging you. I've been like that before. Oh yeah, we're cool when we're winning. When we're doing good, oh, am I not awesome? Praise me, guys. Praise me. I'm amazing. But then when things are going bad, when I'm not feeling the love, hey, God, come on. Show some love, man. I'm your hero. You allowed me this great victory. You made me awesome. Don't let me die unawesome. You know? And that's the way Samson views the world. Again, a childish mindset. He's obsessed with his own needs. A wiser man might take the time to thank God for giving him victory, or perhaps even meditate on the mistakes he made that got him here. But instead, come on, God, I'm thirsty. Give me some water. What I find funny is God gives it to him. See, something we may not realize is that sometimes there are moments in our life where God is allowing us our little moment of selfishness. He's allowing us to bask in our own sinful behavior. Because he's setting us up for something bigger. He's setting us up for something. And we're going to see that next week. Next week, we are going to talk about Samson's greatest failure, Samson's greatest fall, and we're going to talk about what happens when we reach our lowest point. Because Samson hasn't reached his lowest. Not yet. He's still riding a high. The loss of his fiancée, the death of her family, the turning on him from the hands of his own people, that's not his lowest. He's still too high for that. We got a lot to go over next week, guys. I'm really excited for it. But what I really want you to take from today is what revenge does to us, how childish revenge is. There are going to be moments in your life where you feel wronged or you feel like someone did you wrong. What I want you to do from now on is don't look at it the way Samson looked at it, where everything you have done is justifiable. Even if it actually is legally or is in your own mind, I don't want you to look at your life like that. It's something I need to do too. Don't look at your life in terms of what you can justify and what you can consider righteous. It's not about that. The Lord told us constantly, vengeance is the Lord's. Now why? Is it because God wants to deprive us of our chance to get our revenge? No, it's because we're not mature enough to handle revenge. Because once we get revenge on someone else, they're going to want revenge on us because they're going to think the exact same way. It is a never-ending cycle of, well, they did us wrong, 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 and it never ends. We're not mature enough to handle revenge, which is why God is the one who should be handling justice. If Samson has proven nothing else to us in these past 2 weeks, he is a childish brat. So I leave you with a question to meditate on before we go. Is there any hope for someone like him? Is there any chance for someone like Samson? Consider that, because we will answer that question next week. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Had a great time, and I will see you in my next video. Take care. Hello everybody, Raven Knight here, and welcome back to our third and final installment of our journey through the life of Samson. I'm very excited to finish this up, guys, but we are going to be here for a while. We got a long one today because chapter 16 in Judges, which is where I want you to turn right now if you have a Bible, is a very long chapter, and we got a lot to talk about today. But we are going to talk about something very important in our Christian walk that Samson has to teach us. Something that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to Samson is this lesson. We think about Samson because he's a strong man. We think about Samson because of just how super powerful he is. The first example that we can probably think of a superhuman individual that God blessed. But Samson has a lot to teach us from this chapter. So again, turn to chapter 16 in the book of Judges. And while you're doing that, if you are brand new to this Bible study series or to what I do on Sundays, welcome. I am the Raven Knight, and every Sunday I do a Bible study video, usually part of a series. We are wrapping up the story of Samson, and we will be moving on to something new next week. If you are a veteran who watches a lot of these, welcome back, and I hope you've been getting something good out of the story of Samson. So today I want to propose a question to you guys before we jump into the reading. What do you think it looks like to be at your lowest? And when I say lowest, I mean at the point where there seems to be no hope, where everything has crumbled and fallen around you. See, one of the common problems Christians face is the delusion of constant success. We fail to realize that quite often God has to break us in order to remake us. So when a Christian reaches their lowest point, which we just talked about, the place where we feel like there is no hope, we often assume that God has just abandoned us, that we cannot be saved, or worse, we just walk away from God because we don't see the success we think we're owed. I've seen that a lot. I've seen a lot of people just say, I'm going through hard times, so I'm tired of following a God who won't get me out of those hard times. But the truth is that quite often, God can truly begin to work through us when He's brought us to our lowest. He can't really use us until He's broken us. He can't really make use of us until we're shattered, until we let go of ourselves, until we realize that without Him, we're nothing. We have to be brought to the lowest point in our lives before God can really bring us to our full potential. And Samson demonstrates that here. So let's see Samson reach the lowest point in the most incredible way. Turn to Judges chapter 16, and we're going to jump to verse 4. We're not going to read verses 1 through 3 because that's preamble. We don't need to worry about that today. We're going to start in verse 4. So let's read. Sometime later, he fell in love, talking about Samson, with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his strength and how we can overpower him, so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. 1,100 shekels of silver from each one of them. So a little bit of background here. Let's take a minute to talk about Delilah and the Philistines. Firstly, Delilah is a figure we only hear about in this chapter of the Bible. We know very little about her backstory or what brought her here. Some say she was a prostitute or some kind of hooker, which is very likely, but we simply don't know. What we do know about her is three things. One is that she was stunningly beautiful, and this can be seen in just how head over heels Samson falls for her. Two, that she is tenacious. She does not let setbacks and mistakes hold her back or damage her chances of victory, which is admirable. And three, she is manipulative and cunning. We're about to watch Delilah pry the truth of Samson's power from his mouth, and all at the behest of the Philistines. And as we can see, the Philistine leaders were each going to offer a substantial amount of silver. Now you might be saying, Raven, how much is 1,100 shekels of silver? That's about 28 pounds or 13 kilograms. And you might think, well, that doesn't sound too much, until you realize that the Philistines don't have one leader, they have 5. The Philistines have 5 leaders, and each one is going to offer that amount. That's a fortune. That is a fortune that could set you up for life. No wonder Delilah is enticed. No wonder Delilah wants to do this. That is insane. You can kind of see why she wants to do it. But let's see how she goes about it. This is going to be nuts, and this is a lot of reading. We're going to be going straight through Judges 16:6 all the way through 14. So bear with me, it's a lot of reading. Here we go. So Delilah said to Samson, tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued. Samson answered her, if anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man. Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him up with them. When with men hidden in the room, she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame, so the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, you have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied. He said, if anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I become as weak as any other man. So Delilah took new ropes and tied them to him. Then, with men hidden in the room, she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson, all this time you've been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied. He replied, if you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pen, I'll become as weak as any other man. So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with pain. Again she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pen and the loom with the fabric. Let's talk for just a minute about all that. I know that was a lot, but we need to talk about it. The first thing you might be asking after hearing all that is, how can anyone be so stupid? There's an old saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So what the heck does a third time constitute? Let's start by answering this. Let's start by this. Why does Samson let Delilah do all this? So Delilah walks up to him and says, tell me the secret of your power. Tell me how I can weaken you. And Samson just tells her all this stuff. Why would he let her? Why not get suspicious? Wouldn't he immediately kind of look like, why do you want to know that? It'd be like Lois Lane asking Superman what his biggest weakness is. It's a bit sus, right? Well, you got to remember what we're dealing with. A big child. Samson has a real problem with lust. We noticed that when we first read about him, because he saw a woman, a Philistine woman that he did not know and had not talked to, and just said, I want to marry her. I want to marry this woman. I don't know a thing about her, but I want her. He's got a problem with lust. And in his mind, here's Delilah saying, how can I weaken you and tie you up? And he's probably thinking, oh, she wants to get funky. She wants to get a little freaky in bed. Maybe he's into a bit of bondage or dummy play, that kind of thing. So he goes, oh, well, if that's what she wants to do, it's all for playing, right? Oh, if you bind me with some fresh bowstrings, that'll do the trick. And of course, who shows up with the Philistines? He busts free easily and takes them out. Well, here comes Delilah. Oh, you lied to me. What's the real secret? Now, if I were Samson, my first thought would be, yeah, honey, I'm fine. Thanks for asking. But why did the Philistines suddenly show up when you thought you'd bound me up? But no. Dude goes, wow, she really wants to play. Okay, sure. Try brand new ropes that have never been used. Second verse, same as the first. And what does Samson do? Does he say, okay, Delilah, what's the deal, honey? What's going on? No. He's right back at it with the, okay. Let's try this again. This dude is blinded with infatuation. He wants it, and he wants it so bad that he's throwing out any rationality he might have. Guys, he falls for this 3 times. Now, you might say to yourselves, that's ridiculous. I wouldn't fall for this 3 times. I would not fall for the same trick 3 times. Maybe not this one. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever done the same sin multiple times? Have you ever failed in the same way multiple times? Even though you knew the consequences, even though you knew what waited on the other end of it, even though you knew that something was wrong with it, you still fell into it again? You can say it was an accident, but still be honest. Have you fallen for the same sin? It is easy for us to look at Samson and go, oh, what a moron. You fell for this 3 times? But what if we analyzed ourselves? Have we ever wanted something? Have we fallen for infatuation or greed or gluttony or envy or lust or wrath? Have we fallen for a sin so deeply that we do commit it more than once, twice, 3 times, 10 times? Let's not be too harsh on Samson. Many of us are not so different. The difference between us and Samson, though, I would hope, is that we recognize that what we do is wrong and we try to correct it. Mistakes happen. We fall back into bad habits. That happens. Samson isn't even aware that what he's doing is sinning. Or at least he's aware that his time with Delilah is sinning, but he isn't aware of the mistakes he's making. So let's keep going. This gets a lot better. Verse 15. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the third time you've made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. Now that does give us a little bit of hope about him. Notice here that Samson actually seems to be a tad more responsible. In verse 16, it says that she had to press him for days, ridiculing him, testing him, vexing him. Apparently, Samson wasn't fool enough to give her the truth right away. He did seem to know, I shouldn't give you that. I shouldn't give you that. But Delilah knew how to play with his emotions and push him. She knew how to push him. She pushed him for days, according to this. So he didn't fall for it in one day. It took her days to get it out of him. Folks, let this be a warning. If your girlfriend or boyfriend acts like this, I'm going to go ahead and give you a harsh reality. They don't love you. They are using you. They want something from you. In Samson's case, it's his weakness. But for you, think about what it is they're asking. Here's some common ones. Have sex with me if you really love me. If you really love me, you'd have sex with me. Or, hey, you know what? Do some drugs with me. Come on, you love me, right? Come on, let's both do drugs. I want you to join me. I love you. Or how about, look, give me $100 if you really love me. Look, come on, you love me, right? And I'm in tight with financial situations, okay? And if you really love me, you'll help me out of it. It's just $100. Come on, that's a small price to pay. There are many Delilahs in this world. Many individuals blessed with physical beauty and handsome features that have mastered the art of manipulation. They feel no shame in using the people who lust after them and do not mind hurting you for their own gain. I have fallen for a Delilah in my life, and I was too blind to realize it until she'd already played me like a fiddle. A mistake I still regret to this day. Don't be like Samson or me in this case, please. Don't be like Samson or me. The first thing Samson should have done when she starts asking for his weakness is leave the situation. He didn't. But then on the third try, after the third failure, she pulls the, you don't love me. If you loved me, you'd tell me. That's the first warning sign to me that says, pull out. Get out of this. No one should ever use love as a conditional for your behavior. If you loved me, you'd do blank. That automatically throws up red warning signs. And that's when I say, love should never be a conditional. The love should be unconditional. You can write that down if you want. God is the same way. He does not demand a condition for our love. He loves us unconditionally. There's nothing we can do to make God love us more or less. He loves us unconditionally. Let's move on. Sorry about that. Verse 17. So he told her everything. No razor has ever been used on my head, he said, because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, "Come back once more, he has told me everything." So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. After putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. She then called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free," but he did not know that the Lord had left him. You know, if someone were to write my biography, that last line is the one line I never want them to put in my story. He did not know the Lord had left him. That line alone sends chills down my spine. Why? Why was it just because his hair was cut? Well, see, the hair was the physical connection. It was the promise made. never cut his hair, or else he will lose all of his strength. That's his physical connection. But there's more to it than that. There's more to it than just the hair, guys. What did Delilah say to the Philistines? Come up again, he's told me everything. In some translations it says, he has bore his heart to me. He has given me all of his heart. He gave her his heart. He gave her everything. He worshiped at her altar. Guys, God is not a tyrant. I know that there are some atheists out there who would tell you that God is just a sky tyrant. He's not a tyrant. How do I know this? Because he's not going to force you to worship or love him. If you make it clear to God you have different priorities and you want to worship something else, God is not going to stand in your way, and he is going to take a few steps back. Samson has made it abundantly clear all his life that his decisions, his actions, and his wants were all aligned with himself and not God. He used God's gifts for his own gain. He flaunted his power like it was a toy, and when his faith and loyalty were tested, he showed just how little value it had by paying a whore with it. Look, it's one thing to fool around in bed with the person you love. And it's one thing to pull practical jokes. They're not cool, but you know what? Whatever. But he bore everything to Delilah, even to the point of giving away his covenant with God. Let me put that in perspective. On my 26th birthday, my dad gave me a revolver that used to belong to my grandfather. It was passed down from my grandfather to my father, and finally to me. It is an old gun, a reliable gun, but an old gun, and it's special to me. So imagine if I went to go sleep with a prostitute, already an inappropriate and ungodly thing to do, but let's use that hypothetical, and to pay for her services, I gave her that revolver. What message does that send? What does that tell you about my thoughts on my grandfather and father? Samson gave up his covenant with God, handed it over, and thus God stepped away because it was a clear sign. You don't love me. You've given up. And so the idea that he did not know God had left him, that line terrifies me. I never want that for me. I can't imagine how horrifying that would be, to still think that God is with you, but have no idea. See, Samson had just taken it for granted that God would just always be there, man. No matter what I do wrong, God's going to be there. No matter what I do wrong, someone's going to get me out of trouble. He's done that his whole life. He screws himself over at the wedding. Well, God's going to give me the strength to throw this practical joke. He runs home to cry to dad and then comes back and realizes that his wife was taken from him because of his bad behavior. Well, God's going to give me the strength to get back at you. The Philistines come and try to attack him when he's all tied up. God's going to give him the strength to get out of that. And when he's thirsty, God's going to give him water. God's going to give me anything I want so I can live however I want. It does not matter. And eventually, I'm going to give up the very thing God promised to me. And I'm not going to realize just how much I've messed myself up. You have to be pretty broken away from God. You have to be pretty distracted from godly things to get to that point. Samson's case is a very bizarre one, but it is not one that is unheard of. There are lots of people in this world who may have started out following Christ and may still call themselves Christians, but they have wandered so far from God, they have engaged in behavior so heinous that they have given up their connection with God. The Bible warns about people like that. Jesus even mentioned them. Not everyone who calls me Lord, Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who do the will of my Father. There are a lot of people in this world. A lot of people in this world who talk about God like they know him, or claim that they go to church every Sunday, and yet their hearts are so far from God. And that, I think, is the scariest part of the Bible. Not the book of Revelation, not all the prophecies. Those don't scare me nearly as much as that line, that not all who call me Lord will enter the kingdom of God. And I always am scared. Am I one of those? That's the fear. That's what scares me. Samson has just demonstrated his place in that connection. But let's keep going, guys. Like I said, we got to get to our lowest. Judges 16, 21 through 22. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding grain in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it was shaved. These two verses side by side fascinate me. Verse 21 shows us an image of absolute and total defeat. Samson has his eyes gouged out, shackled in bronze, bound up, and then dragged to Gaza to push a mill in a prison as his punishment. But then in verse 22, but the hair on his head began to grow again after he was put in prison. His hair was growing back. There is still hope for Samson. Guys, this is the true message of Samson. The message laid out clear as day. When you are at your lowest, God can still reach you. Keep in mind who Samson is and what he's done. This man has served himself and only himself for the vast majority of his life, and it has brought him to a bitter and dark place of defeat and depravity. And yet, the hair that has been shaved, the covenant that had been sacrificed, can still be restored. Samson was brought to his lowest point, and do you know what probably happened? He probably self-reflected and said, how much of this was my fault? You know, I had an interesting thought while I was doing this Bible study. Why do you think Samson went to Delilah in the first place? Why do you think he went to a prostitute? Why do you think he went to get some loving? Why do you think he was so desperate for a bit of fun, fetishy play? Because I think that deep down, Samson seeks gratification. He lives a very bitter life, a very selfish life, a very childish life, always chasing after the next big thrill, the next big thing, not once ever looking to God for what God wants him to do, but more looking for, how can I benefit? What can I get out of this? How can I be happy and fulfilled? And so he runs to a prostitute. He runs to Delilah to get that. And we see how that works out. Guys, when we run away from God's will for our lives, it never leads to anything good. And now we see what it's led for Samson. And now Samson, having come to the lowest point, having been broken, having lost it all, is finally starting to understand. It took him long enough. Turn to verse 23. Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to celebrate, saying, our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands. When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste our land and multiplied our slain. While they were in high spirits, they shouted, bring out Samson to entertain us. So they called Samson out of the prison and performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them. So let's talk about that for just a second. The Philistines are all gathered together. The 5 Philistine leaders are celebrating. We caught Samson. And we're about to have a big celebratory feast in honor of Dagon, our god, in our temple. Let's all gather and mock Samson and have him perform for us like a clown. Now, when I say perform, I don't mean that he does silly little tricks. I mean, they whip him, they beat him, they throw things at him, they make him dance. They probably strip him down naked. This is not a performance just for him to be goofy and silly. This is a performance to humiliate him further. To basically say, you've treated us bad this whole time, now we're gonna treat you bad. And everyone gets to watch. So I want to make sure you understood. This was not meant to just be an all jest. This was meant to hurt Samson. Now, the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Then Samson reached towards the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. Wow. So let's break that down a little bit. To give you something of an idea of the scene, the Temple of Dagon is now loaded up with tons of people. Just 3,000 people on the roof alone, and all 5 of the Philistine leaders are inside. This place is packed with Philistines, all excited to watch Samson entertain them. But Samson asked to lean on the pillars and finally said a prayer. In spite of Samson's past, in spite of all he'd done, God still answered his prayer and destroyed the pagan temple and worshipers. God still loved him. He was still willing to hear Samson's prayer of confession and repentance and use him this final time. See, one of the effects of sin in our lives is to keep us from feeling like praying. And believe me, I understand this because I deal with it sometimes. Sometimes we have to think like, man, I don't pray nearly enough. I don't. There are times I just do not pray when I probably should. You realize that Samson's only prayed to God twice in his entire life that we've read? Once to just whine and say, "Give me water," and now this time. But perfect moral behavior is not a condition for prayer. Don't let guilty feelings over sin keep you from your only means of restoration. No matter how long you've been away from God, He is ready to hear from you and restore you to a right relationship. Every situation can be salvaged if you're willing to turn again to Him. If God could still work for Samson, He could certainly make something worthwhile work for you. This is what I want to leave you with, guys. We're going to go ahead and wrap up there because the last part of the story of Samson is about how his parents went to retrieve his body. But I want you to know something. Samson killed more Philistines in that one instance than he's killed in his entire life. He was a hero. To many people of the Jews, he was a hero. But we know more about him than they do, don't we? We've wrapped up the story of Samson, guys. And now that we know Samson's full story, what can we say about him? He was a fool. Oh, no, there's no question about that. He was a childish fool, a child in an adult's body. He was selfish. He was greedy. He was lustful. He threw temper tantrums when he didn't get his way. He made jokes out of his sins. He drew other people into his sinful lifestyle. He caused pain and harm to many, many people. He did not take responsibility for his actions. He was vengeful. He saw himself as the victimized and the righteous all at the same time, even when he had clearly done wrong. He had no problem taking an eye for an eye. And he fell for the same lustful tricks again and again. In many ways, he should not be a hero. He should be a person we look at and say, "You are an awful individual." And it's easy for us to say that about Samson. And so let me ask you a question. If someone were to put your life story in the Bible, would we say the same thing about you? Believe me, if they put my life story in the Bible, they'd probably say similar things about me. I've done bad things in my life. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've fallen away from God and spent long periods of time distant from God. There are times I walk through periods of my life where I really don't behave like I should, where I make mistakes and I do wrong, and sometimes I even know I do wrong and I do it anyway. I struggle with some sins, guys, I really do, and I'll bet some of you too as well. But here's the hope that Samson offers. Even for someone as depraved as Samson, even for someone as lost, selfish, lustful, greedy, vengeful as Samson, God can still be there. God is still waiting to hear your voice. God is still waiting for you to come back to Him. God is still listening for your prayer. Sometimes, in order for us to reach the point where we do that, we have to be broken. We have to be shattered. Sometimes for God to really reach us, sometimes for us to really understand God, we have to be broken, like Samson was. Do you think that Samson could have come to God naturally and rightfully the way he was always living when he was at his peak? No, because Samson didn't see a need then. He still thought that it was all his power, all his strength, all him. He never once thought that maybe it was God all along. Not until God stepped back and said, all right, Samson, you've chosen Delilah over me. Let's see how far that gets you. But God still answered his prayer in the end and delivered him his greatest victory. Samson is a great case study of how not to live your life, of how not to be. But he's also a warning. Much like our Bible series in the story of David, Samson reveals to us, just like David did, our own flaws, our own shortcomings. I'd argue Samson's worse than David in a lot of ways. But you know what? Sometimes we are Samsons, just childish adults. After the election results on Donald Trump, I've seen a lot of it. A lot of childish adults. The tantrums and screaming and crying and threats from people online because the election did or did not go the way they wanted. I'm looking at the world right now, and I think it's a fitting time to talk about Samson, because I think we have a lot of Samsons in our day-to-day life. And some of you listening to this right now may be thinking about yourself and saying, okay, you know what, Raven, maybe I am a bit like Samson. And don't feel bad. Me too. There are times I'm just like Samson. But if you're thinking that, if you're aware of it, that is a good sign. It means that you're aware. It means that you are capable of looking at yourself and going, you know, maybe I do need to turn myself around. And that is a good thing. It's time to reach out to God. Say a prayer to the Lord. Ask God, please show me where I'm messing up. Help remove temptation from me. Help me overcome it. And help me come back to you in faith. If you need to talk to someone that you trust as a spiritual counselor or friend, I talk to Jay, my brother, my father, quite a lot when I can't get to a church. But who can do that for you in your life? Who can you talk to? When can you pray to God and thank Him for the gifts He's given you and ask Him to help restore you? Samson is a warning, but he's also a message of hope. That is the story of Samson. Thank you guys so much for watching this. This was a wonderful Bible study series. Thank you for watching this full 30-minute long video. I hope you got something from it. Let me know down in the comments what you think about Samson, what you learned from this series. Would love to hear it in the comments section. God bless all of you. I hope you have a wonderful week. I will see you next Sunday for a brand new Bible study series, or I might take next Sunday off so that I can, rest a little bit and do some reading, because next time we will be starting on the parables of Jesus. We'll be talking about Jesus' parables. I'm really excited for that. And guys, I hope you have a wonderful week. Take care, guys. See you next time.